Hey, all you rad dads out there.
Perfect.
Thanks for asking me to be a part of this.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Brian, for coming to join us on the Rad Dad show. I've obviously followed your work for a number of years, and I guess you've been pretty open about your experience of parenting, maybe more so than some other people on social media. And so I thought I'd really love a chance to chat with you and get you on the show. So thank you so much for coming. I'm gonna maybe start for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with who you are by asking, who are you?
Well, my name is Brian Walsby. I'm 55 years old. I originally grew up in Southern California. I was in the early to mid 80s. I was a nerdy kid that had no friends, that liked music a lot and liked to draw all kinds of stuff. And I soon was sort of tipped off to the world of underground, I guess for a lack of better words, punk rock music. But it was just underground rock music, not necessarily just punk rock. There was like an underground, pre-Metallica makes it big sort of heavy metal world that I kind of ran hand in hand with the punk rock world. And I was like, well, I can be a part of this. All I have to do is learn how to write letters, and got some records, got some early issues of magazines back then, like Flipside from Los Angeles.
So how did that happen? Like, how did you get hooked up with that? You kind of mentioned writing letters. So you just wrote letters into these magazines and bands and stuff and said, I can do some work for you?
Exactly. Like Flipside and Maximum Rock and Roll were Bibles as far as people leaving their addresses. Every town had a band, every town had a promoter, every town had somebody with a zine, and it was a really small universe, but it was pretty clear to see that it's very easy to tap into that. But it was really small, and that kind of world was sort of like it was pretty much the lifeblood of all that stuff, because that's how people communicated. If you wanted to find out about all that stuff, you had to pick up a magazine or a fanzine or write to somebody or go to a show, or it was a welcoming kind of thing. Obviously I'm sure you've talked to people that have said, well, it was way before the internet, and but yeah, it was and it seems kind of impossible to imagine life now without these things that we're kind of slaves to, even if they have benefited us, which they have, obviously. But it was pretty easy to find out about it, but it was so small. It wasn't like you couldn't find out about it. It just wasn't on everybody's radar, and so it was like stepping into a whole new world, basically. And my story is no different than most other people, I'm sure. They probably felt like they were a weirdo, or some dweeb or whatever, and meanwhile here's all this cool stuff and you can be a part of it. All you have to do is participate, and that's what I kind of figured out pretty easy. And then I started drawing really crude, horrible, well-meaning but very enthusiastic things, and people responded, and that was neat. And I just started meeting people and making friends. It was like post high school. Like I don't know what your high school life was like, but I don't remember any of my high school, like none of it. I remember a few people, and I remember meeting people after high school that I would end up playing with. This guy Scott Radinsky.
Yep.
I'm sure you probably know who Scott is.
Yeah.
We were in a band together called Scared Straight, and that was back in Simi Valley. I just talked to him the other day, actually, because I interviewed him.
Right. I saw part 2 of your interview with him was
we're still really good friends. We don't talk all the time, but it's nice.
Yeah.
And so I remember him. I don't really remember a lot of high school stuff, so it was almost like life got more exciting after discovering this world of crazy underground music and meeting people through that. And I honestly do not remember almost nothing about my high school.
That's hilarious.
That's kind of weird because some people remember everything about their high school, and I remember none of it. Of course, it was a really long time ago too. Yeah. So that's how I kind of got into the kind of things, and then I started doing album covers, and
Yep.
I also play drums too. So I've had sort of I wouldn't call it a career, but an alternative method of doing things for a while now. And a while ago, the artistic stuff definitely went out, and I've been self-employed for like, maybe 8 years now. And failure is not an option, and I just keep plugging away. And
right.
Along the way, I, had a daughter.
Right.
So
you're a dad.
I'm a dad. I've been a dad. She's her name is Willow, and she's 10 years old. And I'm also kind of an old dad. I didn't have, I didn't become a father as a young person. So, and I'm kind of used to that now, but it is kind of weird. Some people have kids when they're like pretty young, and they might even still be with, hopefully with the mom that they conceived the child with or whatever, My story was pretty different than some other people's stories, I would imagine. Maybe not everybody, but some people.
Yeah. So we were kind of talking before we got started here, like, that's something you've been pretty open about is your kind of story and your situation. And so maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that. And,
okay.
When you had Willow, what changed? What's that experience been like? We typically will ask the question like, what changed when you became a dad?
Well, Willow's existence was probably the first situation where I realized what love was. Before that, I don't think I really understood that too well. I grew up being, I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it. I grew up, this nerdy kid that didn't have a lot of life experience. So I had all these noble ideas about love and romance and eventually parenting. I listened to too many Descendants records and took that to heart. And then yeah. Well, like
you and me both.
Descendants record's a very noble kind of record of, this is what I believe love and romance is, but you have no life experience, And I remember like listening to things like that, the Buzzcocks and whatever, and saying, well, when I actually have sex and date and do all that stuff, I'm going to know what to do, and I didn't know what to do, I had to make all the mistakes that everybody else did. And I also had, kind of low self-esteem, I guess. So that probably made me decide to do certain things that eventually I grew out of, even though it took a long time, But at the time that Willow came around, her mother and me, we just didn't really get along very well, really, ultimately. Okay. And having a child with somebody that you maybe aren't supposed to be with, or vice versa, is kind of a lousy band-aid for a not particularly great relationship. And it turned out that we learned right away that she was going to have Down syndrome before she was born. So that puts more pressure on an already not great situation.
Right.
But I think and that was presented to me. And I think I took maybe 10 minutes and just went, fine, because we went and saw a doctor. And then when we explained to the doctor that we were going to keep Willow, I always remember this. The doctor said, well, you made a very unpopular decision. And he wasn't saying that like he was judging us or saying that what we were doing was bad. He was just surprised and just said, oh, because, apparently when that happens, maybe some people decide they just don't want to take the chance and see what happens and see it through. I guess that's the nicest way to put it.
Yeah.
And then when Willow was born, I basically fell in love with her. She's this tiny, cute little porcelain doll kind of thing. And even though my relationship with her mom didn't last too much longer, I mean, we kind of ended things when Willow was a year and a half. Willow really was the first, she was cute and helpless, and we had no idea, neither parent had any
Yeah.
idea what was going to happen, So it was like, I always remember the doctor saying that, because I just remember thinking, well, I can't really be a party to, um, to get to taking part in killing my daughter, my eventual daughter, And also she had heart issues. So when she was 6 months old, she had to have open heart surgery.
Wow.
So that was nuts. So, like really both parents went through a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, but we both had differences that just couldn't be rectified or whatever. So it was just best to co-parent and just move on with our lives independently. So that is pretty much what happened to me until about 3 years ago when I met my partner, Kristen. And, so life is completely different. But the time before that, when Willow was a year and a half, it was just about me just being in love with my daughter and just, whatever I was doing was just me trying to keep her happy,
Yeah.
just make her happy. Even though sometimes that isn't always the best thing, in a situation like that.
Right.
But so that's kind of the situation. And now, we've gone through all kinds of different schools. She was in a nice school, a good fit for her finally. It was like her in a classroom with 5 other little boys that had autism, and she loved it. And then the pandemic started and everything went down the toilet. So like she had a speech therapist, and that went down the toilet too. The diagnosis of her having autism happened about 7 months ago. So,
So mid-pandemic.
Mid-pandemic, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it explained a lot of things, I mean, so now we're just kind of, the idea now is I'm just keeping her safe when she's with me.
Right.
And having sort of a schedule for her, a little schedule, even though, it's hard to have a schedule.
Yes.
At times. So yeah, my experience is definitely a little different, but I don't really think about it. I'm so used to doing it. Sleep's weird. She has weird sleep patterns, whatever. And through it all, I draw her. I do all these little things to champion my daughter.
Yeah.
Because I'm proud of her, but I'm not really proud of her because she's doing anything. I'm just proud of her because I'm proud of her.
Yeah. It's an amazing, like if I just kind of like step back on some of the things you said, like going back to before you had children, you kind of talked about like once you had Willow, you kind of learned what love was. I think that's like a almost, I'm going to say, universal kind of thing, that we can all connect on as parents, almost. I know it's not every single parent maybe feels that way, but it's just this feeling you have never known before, right? And so how amazing to look back, and for you, obviously, that memory was very poignant about having that conversation with the doctor when tests come back and you're faced with a decision. Like, I mean, you could never you could never imagine making the other decision now, right? Like it just so
no it never even occurred to me to do something like that, and luckily her mom felt the same way. And I just couldn't, and I'm not judging other people for whatever they decide. I wouldn't do that, but it was pretty bizarre. But I remember, like I said, I kind of made peace with the whole thing, like in like literally 10 minutes or an hour or something. I was just like, and then they gave us all this like stuff to read about. Imagine planning to go to Europe, but you go to India instead. That's when you find out your kid has some sort of disability.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's like, well, that's kind of a weird way to put it, but I guess they're trying to make it the most relatable thing you can say about it. But she just kind of taught me what love is, and I'm just kind of used to Willow being Willow. I don't look at Willow and think, there's Willow, my child with disabilities. I just think that's that's my daughter, and I love her, and she loves me, and she loves everybody in her family, and you know, sleepless nights here and there, whatever, it's no big deal. The only thing that's weird, of course, is when I have her, and I don't really do a whole lot other than have her. And then when I don't have her, and the rest of her family does, then that's when I work and sleep and
Yeah.
Be self-employed. So it all kind of works out.
Yeah, you kind of, I mean, that's your schedule, that's your reality, that's how it works for you guys, and
Right.
that's how you make it work, right? I mean, we've kind of talked with other dads on the show before too, who especially, talked with musician dads who are touring for 6 months out of the year or whatever, and talk about how they make that work. And kind of everybody has their own situation they have to make work, and that's what works for you guys.
Exactly. That's it. So me and Kristen, we will have her half the time, and then sometimes we get Kristen's daughter down here, and the two girls get along really well. Kristen,
Oh, that's great.
her daughter's name is Belle, and Belle's like a really sweet, smart, like 6-year-old girl that's super creative, kind of like her mom. She's like learning how to play piano, and she's really into Grant Hart and Dale Crover, and
Wow.
likes the cardiacs now, or cardiacs, excuse me. And she's definitely a chop off. She's a lot like her mom, and she's really funny and super. Well, she's kind of super advanced, really, and she loves Willow unquestionably. And so having both of them around for me is like awesome. I even during the pandemic, like she was with us for 4 months last year, I think, and it was just I really liked it. And also with Belle, there's just certain things I can do with her that I can't do with Willow. Doesn't mean anything other than just that, like I can crack a sarcastic. Like Belle's like 6 years old, but you would think she's 12 if you heard
Right.
her. So, and they really, it's like they're like sisters. It's really nice, So that's been a nice little thing. We don't get her all the time. That's a whole other situation, but again, that's our schedule, and that's how we make it work. And we just deal with things as they come, and I just work around everything. And I went on tour with the Melvins for I had a job for 10 years
Right.
selling merchandise, and I don't think that's going to be happening anymore. Um, Toward the end of last year, also, it just seemed pretty obvious that since Willow is starting to change, that even the idea of me leaving, not necessarily for the Melvins, but for anybody, that's just not going to be something I can make work anymore.
Right.
So so I don't really envision any of that stuff, because everything is has been changing in the pandemic and everything. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the pandemic as far as people that are musicians go.
Right.
But for right now, this is what's going on, and it works. And just being a dad when I'm a dad, and then when I'm not a dad, I just work. And I still want to play drums again eventually.
Yeah.
So it's just a weird life of a creative person that seems to have kind of a less structured sort of situation than some other dads, I think, do.
Yeah.
And then I just try to make it work within that, and that's all I can do.
It's the last year in particular has basically just thrown everything on its head, but especially for certain, I'm going to say professions or careers or paths.
Yeah.
Musicians and artists being one of them, right? Where that's your bread and butter. Things have to be going on, in order to make it work. So you kind of have to work around that. I mean, we've seen some creative ways to, get things going. Lots of cool merch things happening, some live streams, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I gotta say, I'm really glad. I feel bad for my musician friends out there, and everything I do is basically centered around music anyway, even if it's art. So it's still tied in. But I am kind of glad that I'm not a musician, and strangely enough, things have been last year was was actually pretty good. In some ways, nothing changed, so I did just fine, drawing stuff for people when they wanted it, and
Yep.
getting work that way. So if I can just keep that going, no matter what happens, I'll be fine, I think.
Right. So Brian, you're a dad, you're a stepdad,
Yeah.
you're an artist, you're an author, you
Yeah.
got lots going on.
Yeah.
We talked about a little bit, how you've shared stories about your experience as a dad through social media. We're chatting today. I can really feel, the love and dedication you have for your kids. Maybe I'll ask you, so this is the Rad Dad show. Do you consider yourself a rad dad?
Well, not really. Maybe I've done some rad things, whatever, but occasionally I've done some rad things, I guess. I mean, because my situation is so weird and because it's kind of more unique than other people. I think just the fact that I'm trying to champion Willow and not through any kind of ways like, well, I'm not really a part of a lot of, I don't have a community surrounded by people that have other kids with Down syndrome or whatever. But because I'm always just drawing stuff with Willow, and I made her like part of you remember the Misfits Fiend Club thing? I did Miss Willow Fiend Club. Somebody told me that a while ago. I made stickers and this, some people have been really touched by some of my stories, and they've let me know because they have children in the similar, their parents in a similar situation. Other people I guess they just think she's cute and pretty, and it cheers them up to see little videos or just things that she does. And so I guess in that regard, I guess I must be kind of rad, I guess. But I'm not doing it, I'm not thinking about doing it to, get brownie points. I'm just trying to communicate a little bit about what it's kind of like, and because ultimately it doesn't really matter what's going on as far as what she has to deal with, and I'm sure other people that have kids that have disabilities feel the same way. You just get on with things. So I think that's pretty rad. And also I've met some people that are parents that I don't have parent solidarity. Like, I don't really think that because somebody's a parent, that means I have to, oh, well, if you're a parent, I'm a parent, we should get along. Or some parents really fucking suck,
Yeah.
the way they treat their children, which has nothing to do with disabilities or not. Just, not everybody should be a parent. It's a tough job. It's really hard. And when you have kids, it's like your world just changes dramatically, not just because of how you feel, but when you deal with other people that you might used to be friends with. There's been people that once you have kids, it's like you're dead to them, or it's like they also think that you're so busy that maybe you wouldn't want to see them or still be friends with them. And anything, it's that's the time when you need people. When you have like a year-old child or a 2-year-old child, and it's like you and your partner, wife, whatever, and you're drowning, and maybe you don't live near where other where your parents are, if your parents are lucky enough to still be around. So that's another aspect of being a parent, is like being a parent's almost like if you like to drink a lot and then quit drinking and go into bars, you kind of find out who really kind of has your back ultimately.
Yeah.
And usually the people that have your back aren't like scene orientated punk rock musician, go to the bar types. You know what I mean? It's like you just kind of find that out. And, it was like when Willow was born, I might as well have moved to Mars.
Right.
And I think that used to bother me a little bit, and then I just kind of got used to it because everyone's busy. If you have a kid, everyone's busy. And when you get older, you're just busy with life and stuff like that. So I don't try to take it personally anymore. But for a while there, especially when Willow was like 3 or 4, and it was just me and her. I would try to do stuff with other people, and it was just hard. And because everyone's busy, life
Yeah.
life seems to be so much more accelerated now. So so that was kind of weird. But
Well,
I don't know.
you kind of like, I asked you the question, do you consider yourself a rad dad? A lot of people are reluctant to answer that, right? It feels like it's not the humble thing to do or whatever. But I think the show, so
Yeah.
it's called the Rad Dad Show. We like, it kind of has two meanings, I think. And that's why we like to ask that question. So one being, we kind of try and interview who we think are rad. Maybe they're musicians or artists or whoever. Um, and to us, that's cool. But you've identified, I think, what probably the deeper meaning is there's more to it than that, to being a rad dad. And so maybe I'll put that back on you. You've kind of hinted at it before, but what do you think being a rad dad is? You kind of indicated some people aren't meant for it.
Oh,
So what are
well,
those traits to you?
well, just loving your child, and just being there for them and trying to guide them. And like Mother was never going to drive a car. She's never going to be independent. And I'm fine with that. That's another thing I made peace with. So my experience as a dad is going to be something that ultimately is going to be way different than some other people. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to be there for her. That doesn't mean that she doesn't love me unquestionably, or vice versa. In her own way, I know she does. When she puts her little arms around me and licks my face and says meow, and
Right.
points at the couch and ordering me to sit down, whatever. You know, um, and I guess when I say that other people, well, I mean, but that's a given. I mean, everybody has stories about friends or maybe even their parents that parents try their best, and I don't think not. When I say not everybody should be a parent, I think that I don't think I don't feel like I'm saying that maliciously. I think people also find out that maybe it's going to be a lot harder to be a parent than they thought. A lot harder, especially if you're like, you got to be unselfish for starters, and it's hard to be a parent when you're selfish. We're not even getting into people that have problems with anxiety, or like, what if your dad was an alcoholic, or
Yeah.
like my parents tried their very best, but we had really no guidance because they were wrapped up in their own. Especially my dad. My dad had anxiety, and I don't think he particularly wanted to be a parent at the age he was at, and he went through a lot of shit very quickly as a young adult. And I have a lot of he passed a few years ago. I have a
I'm
lot more
sorry.
empathy. Oh, that's okay. Well, it's going to happen to everybody. Um, I have a lot more empathy now for somebody like that, like my dad, because I don't think anybody really sets out to be a lousy parent, you know. But it takes some people longer than others to decide how they're going to be a parent. Like if you're going to put aside a bunch of stuff, your own desires and wants, that's going to help. But if you're not prepared to do that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
it's going to be weird. So I I think I'm pretty rad, I guess, as a parent.
Well, do you like, you kind of touched on your dad. Do you reflect on your relationship with your dad and how your dad was as a parent, um, and apply that at all to your parenting, whether you're, you know, imitating certain things or going completely against that? Like, how does that factor in for you?
Going completely against it, and my dad, bless his heart, he tried, but he was, he had a lot of anxiety, and he just kind. I don't think he really wanted to be a father to 3 little boys before he was in his 30s, and his parents got sick pretty young. There was a lot of pressure and stuff. I'm a lot more mindful of that pressure now because, you know, I mean, it was so late in the game when I became a parent. And people like, I don't know about your parents, but my parents got married when they were really young and had kids when they were really young. And that's just something that a lot of people just don't do anymore.
Right.
Or there's a lot more mixed sort of family situations or whatever. I don't really apply a whole lot for my dad. I just have more empathy for my dad because I don't think anybody really sets out to be a neglectful person or parent, I think people just have things that they're born with, and they have to just deal with them. And that's sort of what I feel like when I think about my dad. I just feel a lot more empathy for my father instead of. I mean, I was never really angry at him, but I think I have two other brothers, and I think for my little brother at least, he's been a good role model of what not to do. But again, when you have no life experience, you end up possibly doing some of the same things. So I think he did a few of the same things in his decisions too, just because not everybody comes out into the world knows exactly what to do in terms of relationships or any of that kind of stuff. It takes a while to figure that out. And people like my dad, when they did all that stuff, they did it at a very young age. And that's just not as common now. People don't have children, and that was what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have it all figured out when you're like 20 years old.
Yeah.
And some people
That's
stick
insane.
it out. Yeah, it's crazy because I don't think people would do that now. Now you have people having kids much later in the game. And, a lot of it also is circumstance. If you get somebody pregnant and you both agree to be a parent, then you're going to be a parent regardless of what happens, and that seems to be how children are coming to this world.
I think
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry to interrupt you. I think I feel like you hit the nail on the head. Like, a common thread, regardless of whether you become a parent when you're 20 or 45, is dealing with that kind of like shift in selfishness, right? You talked about selfishness. Not everybody's maybe as adaptable to kind of moving away from that, but that is almost like an essential characteristic that you need to become self-aware of, that like
absolutely
it can't all be about me anymore. And that's not to say you need to like shut your whole life down and make it just about your kid, but
but you have to having a kid is how many children do you have?
So I have two girls. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's a lot every day. So you probably have something worked out with your wife or partner where, okay, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that. And then at some point we'll switch and then you can do this and then you watch them while I do this. And then it's a lot and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, it's a lot. Being a parent is a fucking whole lot of work, So, it's, I forgot why I asked you that or what we were talking about before we went into
We were talking
that.
about that selfishness aspect of like that, I guess that that new sort of like wave that hits you where you can't be sort of all about yourself anymore.
Oh yeah, definitely. But in a weird way, it's kind of nice not to have it all be about yourself. To be less self-absorbed, is not necessarily a bad thing. Or just being self-absorbed in the 2 hours you're allowed to be self-absorbed in, because you have responsibilities, and I don't know anything any different at this point. So
well, it's part of what our aim is too with Rad Dads is, so one of our big things is positive parenting. And so one of the key ways we've kind of tried to encourage that is through support for dads, and just sort of like, the podcast is one way we do that. We communicate, you hear stories of other dads, because I think, like, I don't know what your experience was, you kind of touched on it a bit earlier, that like in the first couple years, you didn't have a whole lot of people around helping out, maybe giving advice, sharing stories, even just like to hear, I'm having a shitty day, and that's, someone to say that's normal, like that's a normal thing. And
that's
part of that is, what we try to accomplish here is, you don't kind of have to feel alone, and so hopefully that can help transition some of those feelings and behaviors when you're especially become a new parent.
Oh yeah, like even just the whole nature of this show. I mean, just like I've only watched one interview so far. I might have watched. Did you guys interview Bill Stevenson?
So we did. It wasn't a video interview, but yeah, I talked to Bill at the Blasting Room 25th anniversary.
Okay, well, I felt like maybe I'm supposed to interview him tomorrow for my thing, which
really?
Kind of excited about.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll be. just to hear stories from people like him and well, Milo, anybody, it kind of makes you feel less alone as a parent, regardless of the situation you're in. And, it's just cool, well, there was like a movie that came out. I forgot the name of it. I want to say it was kind of okay. It had people in it that, like the singer. I've never even heard this band.
Was it The Other F Word?
Yeah, the guy from
Pennywise.
I've never even heard that. I have no idea what they were like. But they're talking to him and stuff, and he was like the centerpiece of the movie because I guess he wrote the book that it was based off of.
Yep.
But I don't know anything about that guy. But I was like, well, that's kind of a rough deal. But at the same time, it looked like he had a good situation, and even though touring is exhausting in a rock band, and you do have to sacrifice stuff, if that's your job, then that's your job. That watching that was kind of interesting because everybody had a very different story, and there were a lot of other people in there that had stories about abusive parents and growing away from that and applying the opposite of that for their situations when they had children. And I didn't really have that. I had well-meaning parents that just didn't have a lot of guidance and that had their own problems. But it was never like an abusive situation. It was just more neglectful situation. And I noticed in that movie there was more than a handful of people that had pretty brutal upbringings, I guess. But yeah, stuff like that's great. There should be like 1,000 things for people that are parents. They don't give you a guidebook, and you can read all the stuff that's out there, like how to be a good parent. But you're going to make mistakes, and you just have to get in there and just do the best you can, and with what you got, and hopefully build on that. And that's really all you can do, And the results are, even though my situation's kind of tough at times or whatever, I wouldn't trade anything, I wouldn't trade my daughter or the experiences or now that she has like a new little sister some of the time.
Right.
I wouldn't trade any of that, but yeah, it's being a parent's tough. Being a parent in the best of times is already tough as shit.
Yeah.
So it no matter what, it's a lot of work and it's rewarding, but it's hard,
So you kind of talked a little bit earlier about how you haven't necessarily found a kind of group of maybe parents experiencing some of the same things as you in terms of maybe having a special needs kid and sharing some of those experiences. But I wonder, and this is just my observation, like through your social media, and you kind of talked about it before, that you kind of sharing some of your experiences with Willow, maybe some of the challenges. I know the other day you wrote a post about kind of going for a walk and you're behind a group of people, and that was really stressful. And like
it was horrible. It was horrible. It was like, it was horrible because it's like you feel so angry at these moms and their children who are just doing a normal thing. But it's like, children, it goes back to the whole parent solidarity thing. I don't really feel parental solidarity, I just don't. And it's not their fault, but but they're not going to understand that Willow's going to want to reach out and get in their shit or whatever, and the pandemic, whatever. But I was so angry about all that, and I know that's ridiculous, but at the same, I can't help it.
It's not like I think we all have those kinds of feelings too at different times, where we feel like people aren't understanding our situation and aren't sympathetic to our situation, right? And like it's part of why you share that, to kind of create that dialogue, or is it just purely I just want to share this? Like
it's kind of like, it's weird to talk about your own personal life because sometimes I'm very unflinching about it, but other times I'm not so much unflinching about sharing stuff like that because that is going to resonate with some people for sure. And it's not like pity party, self-absorbed dramatic bullshit. It's just, this is just a daily occurrence of what would happen if I take Willow to a public place, and actually, since I started, because I've always drawn Willow and talked a little bit about her and taken cute pictures or whatever, but I've shared that, but I've never really, until the last 2 weeks, some of the posts you were talking about, I've never really delved into what it's actually really like to have a kid that now has autism and as well as Down syndrome, so, and it's just me sharing that. And since I started doing that, I've gotten more personal responses from people that are parents to people that have autism and, little kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's been a good thing because I am sharing some of these experiences. And I'm not sharing them for sympathy or to show the world how great I am. I'm just sharing them because I just think, well, I want to share it, but also somebody out there might get something from it and they might feel a little less alone, which is always a good thing, And the only thing that's weird about sharing stuff on social media is that, I have a lot of time to be on there and try to promote my artwork and stuff like that. And that's like a necessary evil. And I have slightly less time answering everybody. And, I need to be better about that. But the response has been more immediate since I started actually talking about what it's like to have a really erratic sleep schedule with this 10-year-old, or going out in the middle of a pandemic and being horribly worried about her because of her condition, and also because she had open heart surgery. She might be more vulnerable. The whole coronavirus thing seems to be really random as far as why it affects certain people like almost nothing, and why it kills other people instantly. And that's like a game of Russian roulette. I just don't want to play, and I certainly don't want to play it with my daughter or anybody else. So just sharing is, it's good, and it goes beyond, like, I'm going to champion my kid the way anybody would champion their kid, I guess, but I'm not shy about it. And there is, I guess, some sort of a meaning behind it, but I'm not really thinking actively like this is going to look really good when this is part of what I deal with.
Yeah.
It's my life. I mean, it's just how it goes, I'm not saying that it's cooler or better or worse or anything. It's just my experience being a dad until I guess I die. So that's pretty much it.
Right. Well, I think we kind of, we definitely agree on that. Like I've definitely found through doing some of these interviews and sharing those and some of the feedback that we get from people who listen, like it's good to just talk. And I think this is, to connect back to our conversation about dads maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. I really don't think those conversations were happening back at that time. You have to wonder if some of that, neglect or abuse or, selfishness could some of that been addressed just through kind of talking with your fellow dad and saying, oh, I had a shitty day today, this or this happened,
Well, other people have said this, and this is maybe not completely true, but a lot of times men don't really talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really say that and mean that 100%. But especially back then, like my parents, maybe your parents, certainly other people my age, their parents, they probably didn't really think that they could talk about their problems or issues or whatever. And mental health is always it's something that usually gets brushed aside. You're just supposed to be a man and deal with it or whatever. And plenty of people have been told that. Times are a lot different now. It just seems really hard to imagine people going out and doing the same things now that they did in 1955 or whatever, or 1960. Like, okay, you meet somebody, you get married right away, you have children right away, then you figure it out.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure to put on a couple of young people that maybe don't belong belong together, and they're doing these serious adult things. And that's certainly where my parents came in from. I mean, that was the generation they were from, and I see a lot less of that these days. I mean, there's something really kind of cute about sticking it out with somebody and doing all these things you really don't want to do, and then being miserable for the rest of your life. But it doesn't really seem like a really good idea, you know. But I think people were more willing to do those kind of things back then because that was just the time of it, and that's why you probably end up with a lot of, you know, broken homes and people turning to whatever they turn to for coping, like whether it's drinking or, you know, yeah. So it's definitely, I have a lot more empathy for my father and people like that just went ahead and did all these things with another young woman, their wife. And, you know, some people knew right away that they're meant to be together, and then other people, I think, just do these things because that's what they think they have to do. And that certainly reminds me of some people back then that decided to do all that stuff.
Right.
It's a lot. I mean, it's really a lot. And I think when I was younger, I was a little less understanding of that and maybe more judgmental, because it's kind of hard to look at your parents as people that have problems too.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, totally. As you get older, you start to understand some of the things that kind of made your parents tick or whatever. You kind of, and maybe you don't identify with it, but you can kind of empathize or sympathize with it, or understand maybe how hard that must have been for them, even if it was stuff that, you know, you don't agree with. And it's funny, we're talking about Bill Stevenson. He's a good example. I don't know how much you followed, you know, the songs he wrote about his dad.
I know about his situation with his dad, and I got filmage and stuff, and I know he had a very interesting relationship with his father, and I think he talks about how his mom was had some problems too, and you know, what's the song? Stevens on the Lemonheads,
Boy,
right? Steve's Boy, and then One More Day.
Yeah,
I love Bill's songs. It's just too bad that he has to wait for something horrible to happen before one gets written.
Yeah, exactly. Or come to him in a dream.
Yeah, I'm going to ask him something about that tomorrow. His songs always really cut to the bone.
For sure they do. For sure. One of the greatest songwriters ever, for sure, in my books. He's so great.
Yeah. I'm going to ask him about the song Make Believe tomorrow. The all song Believe. You know about that one?
Yeah.
That's a brutal song. Maybe I won't ask him about it. I guess I'll see. Anyway, sorry.
No, you know what? The whole tail end of that album is hard hitting, right? Like those are some kind of heavy songs on that. The last 5 songs on that album.
Yeah. I like the fact that as they age, their lyrical concerns age with them.
Yeah.
That's a lot better to me than like pretending that you're 20 years old forever.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of, I'm sure you've seen a lot of like pushback on them over their last few tracks they've released, and people saying like, you know, why don't they just like stick to what they're good at and stay out of politics? And it's like, they've always been a political band, first of all, but this is what they care about right now. That's what they're writing about.
Oh yeah. As far as that, like I drew a whole bunch of stuff as the pandemic unfolded, and as our idiot ex-president, you know, how he reacted to it. That was pretty much what made me decide. I felt compelled to do that. Maybe not for the first time, but you know, he's easy to bash. But he did nothing about that. And if he had actually done anything about it, or even pretended to, he probably would have won. You know, because then his detractors would have said, "Well, at least he actually did something. He didn't do shit." And I'm glad what happened, you know, but I felt compelled to be a part of that. I don't know why people are so butthurt about people offering their opinions about those kind of things, even if they're entertainers or musicians.
Yeah.
Their opinions are just as valid as anybody else, and you don't have to listen if you don't want to.
Don't listen to the song if you don't identify with it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You also got to be pretty stupid if you base your entire belief system on what somebody else says, you know?
Yeah, maybe that helps to inform your thoughts or opens your eyes to certain things or whatever, but it's, one little piece of the puzzle of what, you becoming you.
Yeah. People don't like being challenged,
Right.
especially
So
when they think everything.
yeah. So Brian, I want to ask you, we do this thing, and I'm going to put you on the spot here like we always do, but we do this thing called the Rad Dads, Bad Dads feature. So we ask you to kind of share with us Rad Dad moment, a time you were really proud as a dad. Could be anything, that blue ribbon kind of dad moment. And then maybe a time when it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. That's the, the bad dad moment. I don't know if anything comes to mind. Usually most dads, it's their bad dad moment that really pops into their head right away.
Like Willow's not used to being disciplined. I hate to use the word discipline, but we're getting a lot better at having her recognize her not so great behavior, and not necessarily having it a timeout situation, but just when she gets defiant and starts yelling at me, no, I'll pick her up and escort her into her room and say, I'll be in here in a few minutes and I'm going to close the door and you're just going to figure it out. And she's all teary eyed and her eyes, she has really big eyes. So it's like, meh. And I feel so terrible about doing that. So that's always kind of like a non-rad dad moment. But at the same time, I'm not doing anything to really hurt her. And then I'll just come in 5 minutes later and just hug her. There's been a lot more hugging going on because she's starting to change. She's more emotional now.
Yeah.
I've yelled a couple times and I feel really bad about that. I mean, it's inevitable that that's going to happen regardless of who your kid is or what the situation is. I've never done anything really super bad, I guess. So I don't, other than like feeling bad about, I know what it is actually. Every once in a while, not too often, but every once in a while, the enormity of being a parent to a kid that's never going to be on their own, never going to have a job on their own, probably isn't going to drive a car. Every once in a blue moon, that will hit me, and then I will get very weepy and teary eyed.
Yeah.
And not really feeling sorry for myself, but just recognizing that is ultimately the reality. And even though that's a reality I made peace with like years ago, every once in a blue moon, that the reality of that will hit me. So that's not very rad, but that's not necessarily a bad thing I've done.
No.
That's just me recognizing ultimately that, I'm not going to be walking her down the aisle in 15 years. One of those things that you're supposed to do as a parent. I'm giving my daughter away.
Right.
And that's okay. But every once in a while, the enormity will hit me. Not often, but it does happen once in the blue moon. And then I'll be upset. And I think that's actually good, to be honest.
I think so too, yeah.
I think it's good to recognize that, not everything is going to be smooth. Not everything, I'm not saying that she doesn't have a happy ending. We'll do what we can to make sure, that she's a happy little thing no matter what. But I think it's good to recognize the reality of that kind of situation. So that's probably the closest thing. But that's not even actually anything I did. Maybe just kind of losing my cool and yelling at her. And she does not like that. And not like it happens a lot. But she's like, I'm not sure how disciplined she is when she's not with me,
Right.
But I know she's not a big fan of not getting her way, and she's also not a fan of being yelled at, and she's kind of sensitive anyway,
right.
like her hearing. So that's happened a couple times, and I feel bad about that. But that's been pretty much it. As far as a rad moment, I think just my entire existence as her parent is a rad moment. I can't really split it into into like some one moment. I just think, I'm hard on myself. Like I'm really hard on myself, and I'm sure a lot of dads probably have lofty ideas about what they should do and and there can't be any weakness, and
Right.
I'm gonna be the best dad I can. And you can't always achieve everything you want, so that's where being hard on yourself and punishing yourself for being a human being comes into the equation. So I've learned along the way that when I get like that and get too worked up about trying to be a great parent, or thinking that I'm not a good parent sometimes, I think if you think that, then that means you probably are a good parent.
Yeah. Having that
what I mean?
insight, right? Like trying to actually think critically about the way you're behaving and how you're feeling.
Yeah. So now when I have those feelings about not feeling as worthwhile about being a good parent, even though I know that's not true intellectually, I know that's not true, but it's part of my makeup. What I do is during those moments, I just say, well, you just got to give yourself a break. You got to give yourself some slack sometimes. You got to just let yourself off the hook once in a while. There's nobody gives you a guidebook when you're a parent.
Yeah.
No matter what. And, you're going to make mistakes, and there's going to be good things and bad things. And that's just life. Life can't be all great and all bad all the time. So when those moments happen and I'm being super self-critical and down on myself, I just say, I just got to give myself a break,
Yeah.
Because you're worth giving yourself a break when you need it.
We're humans too. Like parents, we're humans too, right? We make mistakes. We do things we regret. That's life.
That's life. I mean, not everything is going to be perfect all the time. So when things are less than perfect and you're feeling less than perfect, you should still have enough self-love where you can afford to give yourself a break and just be like, it's okay. I don't have to have everything figured out right this second. I can just give myself some slack here and just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about anybody else that's a parent, but when you're feeling down about being a parent, I always notice that, at least for me, it doesn't last very long. It's just more like reckoning those moments and then actually expressing those opinions. Like what I said about every once in a blue moon when I really get down, but when I just realize, my daughter's never going to be, a so-called normal daughter. It's still important to recognize that stuff and not keep it bottled up. So to have a nice cry every once in a while is not a bad thing.
No, I would agree with you. What is that about parents? Is that why do we? I think we do this as humans, kind of in general too. But it's like comparing yourself to the Joneses or whatever. It's wanting to live up to some ideal of something that It's funny. The more I talk to people, no one's living up to that ideal, right? Like that situation. And I also don't mean to minimize that. Like you have a child with special needs, and so that's going to be very different from you or for you, as compared with a parent of a child that doesn't have special needs, maybe. But I think you totally nailed it. That it's kind of that moment to kind of think about that and kind of feel sad about that or whatever. But then, okay, well, how do I get past this now? What do I need to do to get past it? And so what do you do to get past it? You talked about taking a break. What does that mean?
Taking a break just means giving yourself some slack. It doesn't mean going on a vacation or getting massively drunk or whatever. I just mean giving yourself permission to not be a perfect human being.
Yeah.
It's okay to say that it's okay that you don't have all the answers right then and there. And it's okay to make mistakes. And it's okay to be a human being. And that's pretty much it. I don't mean maybe go for a walk, I guess. Just something that will take you out of your element. I mean, the one thing that's lucky for me and also for my partner and stuff is that we're both kind of like self-employed, artistic, weirdos that don't really need to be around a lot of people, which is kind of good for the pandemic. And I still get the same excitement from drawing and creating that I did when I was in junior high school.
Cool.
Back then, it would be like listening to Cheap Trick and Aerosmith and drawing some horribly mangled drawing of some, fantasy rock band. The drummer has 8,000 drums and amps and stuff. And listening to music and getting inspired by that. And that's what I do now. at 55, I do the exact same thing, and it's still there for me. And I think having that is a big aspect of being able to take things more in stride. If you have something that you like to do, that you enjoy doing, no matter what happens, no matter who's in your life, no matter what problems you have, whether it's music or writing or drawing or painting or whatever, some creative outlet that keeps you sane, I guess. That's a wonderful thing. That's kind of like a gift, and it's cool. Like having an elaborate hobby. I mean, obviously this is far beyond a hobby at this point, but I think having something that you like to do helps out with the other aspects of your life. It's like kind of like a balancing act,
Yeah.
But like,
sorry, yeah, Brian. Sorry to interrupt you. It gets back to that conversation we were having earlier about, just because you become a parent doesn't mean you have to give up everything that made you. And in fact, you're probably doing your child a disservice. I think this is my opinion, but if you do give those things up, right? Like your kid wants to see you being you, and so it helps everybody, I think.
oh, totally. Well, like when we have Belle, Kristen's daughter down here, I mean, I get to do little things with her that I can't do with Willow because she's a different person. And that includes geeking out over, music, being kind of a smart ass to her, like dancing. I have a drum set up here, that kind of thing. And, I know that she enjoys that stuff a lot. And her mom was certainly pivotal in introducing her to the stuff that she just took to right away. I mean, there's not a lot of 6-year-olds that are totally into Grant Hart and David Bowie. Yeah. That's really kind of weird. And very strange, She doesn't really know about the fact that they're departed, though. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'll come later.
Yeah, that'll come later, 10 years, whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, you're sharing something with these little people that's important to you, and whether they pick up on it or not, it's up to them. I don't know what Willow's going to get into. She's an open book. Like, who knows what's going to happen? She's changing. She's starting to do these little things, like she organizes stuff, like in a Joey Ramone kind of way. Because they always hear about Joey Ramone having OCD or whatever, and she started doing that this last year. So it's like, it's really, even though I said what I think is going to happen to her, I really ultimately don't know. It's like an open book. But with Belle, I can still do some of these other things with her as like her, stepdad or whatever. So that's, I still get that outlet, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's cool. So Brian, what do you have on the go right now? What's next for you? You said you're still working on art. So tell us about your book a little bit, maybe, because that's fairly recent. What's happening in your world right now, sort of art-wise?
Okay, Pelicanesis is the name of the book company. They're based out of Claremont, California. This guy named Mark Givens decided to take a chance on all this crap that I kept posting and said, I think you have a book. And I'm happy he did that. And it's based, Self and Punishment's the name of the book. And the theme is basically what it's like to be either completely self-employed or partially self-employed, or just kind of used to the idea of trying to make things happen for yourself in non-traditional means as far as carving out a living. And a lot of the people in the book are probably people in my age bracket that used to be punk rockers or came out of that world, I guess. And, punk rock was always about, kids, youth, you were doing this stuff. And then when you kind of, I don't want to say you grow out of it, but when your initial peer group goes away and life happens, you still got to make a living, and not everybody went to college. Not everybody knew what they wanted to do when they were 20 years old. So it's kind of like this book where I just interview a bunch of people that are mostly very self-reliant about their trials and tribulations, successes, failures, and it's been out for a few months, and I've seen some reviews. I don't think it's been reviewed that much, but I've read about 4 or 5 of them so far, and they've all been pretty positive. Some people really liked it. And I think it's pretty cool. But it's available for $20 through the Pelicanesis website. Should be easy enough to remember.
Yeah, I just ordered my copy a couple days ago.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's funny. I hadn't even realized it had come out. So I don't know how I missed that, but have it on the way. But I'll put a link in the episode so people can kind of link direct to it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, well, like anything coming out right now, unless you're like glued to a computer, how are you going to really know about every little thing? But anyway, so that came out, and
Okay.
that was kind of a nice accomplishment. I don't really have any plans this year other than to stay alive and keep working, and hopefully there'll be some other projects. I think there's a couple things that might be ruined, but they're too. It's too early of a stage to jinx them and talk about them now. But it'll probably be more freelance stuff for this year. I'd like to play drums again.
Yeah.
I've recorded a little bit of music with a friend of mine from last year. This guy named Mike Dean. He plays bass. Has played bass for like a long time in this band Corrosion and Conformity.
Yeah.
And we were friends for a long time, and I think he had a bunch of ideas. And so he has a studio, and he just asked me. I guess there was nobody else around, so he just asked me to play drums. And no, I think he thinks I'm a good drummer. I'm underselling everything, but I think some of that will come out eventually. There might be a little music on the horizon, and just I don't know, just staying alive. No, it's kind of hard to say about anything else at this point, but
yeah, because your work has historically been tied to a lot of music, right? And so that's a big question mark too.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm gonna be going out on the road. I was really spoiled with the whole Melvins experience. It was overall a very nice experience. So it's kind of doubtful that after that I'm gonna be a career road dog at 55 years old. And because Willow's changing and my life seems to be a lot more. It seems more immediate that I need to be here more, even though that was only like 2 months out of the year, maybe a little longer. It's like I kind of feel like I need to be here more than even that short amount of time. So,
so where can people find you online, Brian, if they want to follow what you're doing?
Okay, well, I'm on Instagram. That's probably the most no bullshit thing. I'm on Facebook. It seems like these days that you don't even have to be a friend to see anybody's stuff on Facebook. So really anything I draw, I stick up on Instagram and Facebook. I have a Twitter account, but I've ignored that because I just haven't been able to make that work.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what people do other than I think you have to be a comedian that hates Donald Trump to be successful.
It's a different vibe altogether for sure on Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and whatever. I don't like him either, but there has to be more than just not liking somebody sometimes. As much as that person might deserve it. And I have a website called brianwalsby.net that my friend Charles Cardello from Bifocal Media, he's sort of my business partner. All the t-shirts I've drawn of various bands, he deals with the business aspect of that. So he also designed this website, but I can't control it as much as I would. So you can go there and buy some stuff, some books, some of the old man-child books I did. But I would even say for right now that you'd be better off just going to Instagram and punching in Brian Walsby. And I answer my mail eventually. And any inquiries or whatever, I'm there. I mean, I'm a self-employed freelance person, so that's what I'm doing. That's what I think I'm gonna keep doing for the foreseeable future and trying to stay alive.
Nice. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're all trying to do that. Any advice for dads out there, Brian? Maybe, I'll leave it up to you, but maybe anything you want to share with respect to maybe even having a special needs kid for dads out there that might be, dealing with the same situation, or
Reach
general
out.
advice? Yeah.
Just give yourself some slack for not being perfect, and reach out to other people to communicate when you need to. I would maybe those two things. I think just you're not alone. It might seem like it. There's always going to be somebody out there that's going to be able to relate to whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
Whether you want to put that out there, I realize, of course, putting yourself out there is kind of scary. There's a lot of really cringeworthy moments. Like a lot of my old man-child books I'm fine with what I wrote, what I did, as long as I don't have to reread it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, and luckily, I'm not important enough to somebody that they're going to like hold me to something I wrote and said or drew 20 years ago. I know for other people that's definitely a reality.
That's a concern.
So yeah, putting yourself out there and exposing yourself is, it's tough. But if you're feeling down, just find somebody to talk to, and and don't punish yourself too much for being a human being. As long as if you're like shooting heroin and drinking 20-40 ounces when you should be like watching your child, then you're fucking up, and that's a completely different thing altogether. But if I think most people know when they're doing a pretty good job at something because they doubt it.
Yeah.
So if you doubt that, if you doubt what you're doing, you're probably doing a pretty good job at it.
Yeah. So trust that instinct, right? And connect with other folks.
Yeah. And give yourself a break when you have to. It's like you don't give yourself a break, meaning let yourself off the hook if things aren't perfect at that moment, and because you won't feel that way in 24 hours, and tomorrow is always another day.
Yeah, it's good advice.
Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense, Brian. I really appreciate you stopping by and sharing your story and just chatting.
Oh, yeah.